Hello, and we are back on Morning Shot. Byron, we made a video not too long ago about the Arab Spring happening in South Africa, and we thought to ourselves, yeah, it probably might not happen. But if it did happen in South Africa, one would hope that there would be some resistance to it. But based on an article in Business Tech about the South African army, we wouldn't even know if an Arab Spring happened because there would be no resistance from the state at all because the army is a complete and utter mess. What a surprise.
Yeah, so this is an article around the current state of South Africa's army, which, as Ramon says, was in business tech. And they say that basically they are underfunded, lack critical skills, and they're basically missing an infrastructure, which, a long story short, means there's no money to pay the guys. The guys that are there are useless, and they have no equipment because all got stolen or broke.
Yeah.
Um, Unsurprising, they say that an outline or a reason for this is wasteful spending. You may recall the Army of South Africa was very famous for having spent over 200 million on a vaccine for COVID that didn't exist,
Yeah, from
and
Cuba.
they left, and then they left the fridge open anyway, so it all went fraught. And then they also talk about a lot of illegal activity. And if we really kind of take that into account, what they really mean is they've lost all their weapons to gangsters who, they've stolen all the weapons. And again, we saw this in the KZN riot, where a number of trucks were left unattended. The trucks got stolen with all the weapons on the back, was a lot of the ammunition. And the idea that they're underfunded, not exactly a surprise. We saw that in the KZN riots too, where the army basically went back home because they were like, you haven't fed us in like 30 days. So,
Yeah.
just go back to the base, I suppose. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think any of this is actually, should we say, a surprise to anybody. Um, Obviously, the big thing that they alleging is big irregular spending of 6.1 billion. So obviously, unlike all our crime in South Africa, this has never happened before. But apparently, none of it's been investigated. Who knew? And they've got 8.5 billion of spending that they consider to be fruitless or worthless, which basically means some guy had a nice lunch, probably bought himself a new house or something. Um, there's a lot of what they called fraud or infringements. I don't know what infringements classify as, but apparently there's lots of infringements. And they say that the record keeping at the army is basically non existent. So there you have it, folks. South Africa's once notable SANDF, our defense force, which was once globally renowned and feared by most,
Yep.
basically doesn't exist. So, as you very rightly pointed out, Ramon, if we did have an Arab Spring, what are they pushing against? Because there's no army.
No, exactly. So I think we must go back in time a little bit because remember the arms deal was the biggest ANC or the first ANC corrupt deal that really got the nation's attention. The arms deal was to replenish the arms for the army. So we bought like helicopters and submarines and guns and who knows what else from Britain and France and Israelis to replenish the army because, as soon as we got democracy, we would go to war with Botswana or something. Like, I don't know what the rationale was, but the arms deal was the biggest thing. Uh, so the arms deal happened, hundreds of billions or whatever was spent on it. And now, 30 years later, the army is essentially non existent because, once again, it's a Qaeda infested, ANC run project. And what happens when the ANC run something? They completely destroy it from inside and out. The South African Army, or the SADF at the time in the 70s and 80s, we were sanctioned from doing anything. We weren't allowed to buy ammunition from anywhere. We weren't allowed to buy weapons from anywhere. So what did we do? We created Denal. We created our own weapons. We copied the Galil, we created the R1, the R4, the R5. Our army defeated Cuba in Angola. It defeated the Soviets and the Angolans in the southwest, now known as Namibia. And it was all internally funded, conscripted from South Africa. It was one of the best fighting forces on the African continent for decades.
And an unknown fact that isn't well publicized is actually in the original Gulf War of 1991. The US actually bought a lot of South African military equipment to fight that war. So our
Interesting. Didn't know
prowess
that.
of being able to develop stuff, yeah, my father worked on it. So the our ability to actually fight those or to create those military kind of equipments was so world renowned. We were funding other people's wars,
Yeah.
which obviously ultimately was used to fund, you know, what happened in those days. So it's a very interesting thing. I think this article kind of does go on to conclude that coupled with the demise of the defense industry and in particularly Denel,
Yeah.
that's placed South Africa in a very precarious position. And why, you might ask? It says because the ability to maintain equipment for operations has declined to the point where you have to ask if it is in fact viable to continue to throw resources at them in order to fix what cannot be fixed. So there you go. That's in the article. So they're basically saying even what is there now has decayed to the point where actually you can't really fix it. And they're saying that this has obviously put South Africa now at significant risk. Now, obviously, when the government gets challenged on this, they go, okay, well, at risk of what? Because we're not at war with any of our neighbors. We're not at war with Mozambique or Zimbabwe or wherever else. But what they do tend to kind of neglect or fail to understand is two things. One, ISIS is still in Mozambique, man. Like, they are still there. And
They're
number
here.
two,
They're in South
like,
Africa as well.
yeah. And number two is like, the army isn't just for ISIS. It's also meant to stop you in case of civil unrest. It means that you deploy the army to kind of like guard your own country, sometimes from criminal elements such as gangs. Like, if South Africa had an Arab Spring and there was like mass protests everywhere, what would the army do, man? Like, nothing. You know why they're going to do nothing? Because they've got nothing to do it with. What are they going to do?
Yeah.
Like, are we going to go
Exactly.
back to Assegai and Shields or something? Like,
Yeah, it's a point I made just before
I don't know.
recording this. Like, we wouldn't know we were having an Arab Spring because there wouldn't be any resistance to the riot, right? So the riot could happen. It will be like, oh, it's just a riot because there's no resistance. There's no army trying to stop them. There's no police trying to stop them. It's just people going mental, like the insurrection in KZN. Like, that could have been the Arab Spring that was stopped by the private communities that lived down in KZN. The army wasn't there.
Yeah.
And now we know why. And when the
No.
army did arrive 2 weeks later, they went back after a week because they ran out of food and petrol. So
Yep.
even under the most, auspicious communist ideals of the ANC, they can't do the one thing right, which gives them power, and that is to make sure the army is on your side. They'd rather destroy it
Yep.
for short-term gain than have any form of long-term power in South Africa. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, if the ANC lose an election, they will become violent and rise up and all that.
Yeah, but with what? With
With
what?
what? Yeah, with what? With militias, maybe? With branches? And besides, the ANC are going to kill each other first before they take on anyone else. It had been happening. Assassinations in the ANC have been happening for 30 years, especially around KZN. Branch members kill each other for positions all the time. That is going to be the civil war. It's going to be ANC on ANC because they're running out of money and
Yep.
patronage and all the rest of it and power. They don't have an army to protect
And personalities.
themselves.
It's going to be personalities. It's like we said recently about the policy conference. The policy conference isn't RET with their like expropriation policies and Ramaphosa with his neoliberals. They
Yeah.
all have the same policy. It's just a competition of personalities. Like, do you want to expropriate everything now or just kind of do it a little bit piecemeal? That's it. They argue over time. That's all. Like, is it
Yes.
is it right now or over time? Other than that, like, it's just a personality contest. And you think all these arguings and killings and mass riots and this guy against this guy, it's all over personality. But then, as we very rightly say, and a lot of people have been speculating, what happens if the ANC lose 2024? Will they will they kind of send in the army? Man, I'd love to see them send in the army
Yeah.
because looking at it, none of the equipment works. They probably don't have any bullets anyway, and they all traded their guns for some Samis. So
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, I actually think the general public is probably more armed than the army, which probably explains why the government want to disarm everybody.
Yeah, that's very true. And also, I think it's very important for people to understand if there is unrest in your area. The Minister of Defense or whatever her name is says, uh, the SNDF will be hard pressed to respond to critical events in provinces should the need arise. So basically, my friends, you're on your own. So the benchmark for quelling disturbance and violence and insurrections is KZN. When people took over their own
Yep.
streets and shot anyone who didn't belong there, that is the mentality you must have for any future incursions or insurrections or Arab Springs or whatever the case might be, because the army is not there. So if you stop relying on hope for just one damn time in your life as a South African and you actually take action to make sure that you're prepared privately to deal with these sort of things, you're going to live a good life and you're not going to be surprised by the chaos. But of course, if you think the army still exists in some material way, you'll be very surprised, and you'll end up losing your life, your business, your family, and all the rest of it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Anyway, folks, that's
Anyway,
it. There's no
yeah,
army.
there's no army, but apparently we still have a nation. Who knew? Thanks for watching, everyone. Cheers.
Take it easy, guys. Cheers.